award-winning journalist Sydney Schanberg joins us here in the Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now! Well, tell us the whole story as you understand it, Sid Schanberg.
Well, it's a long and complicated story, but I'll try to do it in brief. In 1973, we were at the early 73, we were at the negotiating table with the Hanoi government, and we weren't doing very well. We bombed them in December of 1972 to try to get them to be more reasonable. That didn't happen. They were going to stick it out and stick to their positions. And one of their positions was that they linked the prisoner issue very, very closely to the issue of reconstruction money, reparations. And they never let those two be separated. So when it came down to us pushing for a final version of this treaty, they refused to tell us before we signed how many prisoners they were returning. And we accepted that condition. They said they would tell us after we signed. So we signed, and they gave us a list, which had 591 names on it. This astounded people in our intelligence community because their list showed several hundred more. And there was this back and forth that the American public never saw because it took place at higher levels. Nixon wrote a letter to Pham Van Dong, the prime minister, in which he said, we have in Laos alone a list of 311 prisoners held alive. And you are sending back 9 prisoners from Laos. Quote, that is inconceivable. That's what he wrote. And it was inconceivable. But when it came time to explain to the American people whether we were getting all of our prisoners back, Nixon went to the television set and gave a national speech on television saying all of our prisoners are on their way home. He knew that was a lie. Now, I don't know what was in Nixon's head or Kissinger's head. Maybe they thought they could get them back later. But our position was no ransom. And so there never was any ransom, unlike the French, who after their defeat at Dien Bien Phu, they had many, many soldiers held back, all of whom, well, I don't know if it's all of whom, but most of whom were ransomed, privately, secretly, by back channel sources and so forth. But that's how they got out. And we refused, and there were several ransom offers, and they were never made public. In fact, Richard Allen testified under oath. He was the national security advisor in the Reagan administration, and he testified under oath behind closed doors, again, not seen by the American public, that prisoners, that there was a ransom offer in early 1972, and that nothing was done about it. And on and on and on.
But you say that a meeting was held between Reagan, Vice President George H.W. Bush, CIA Director William Casey, Allen as well, the National Security Advisor, to discuss this issue of the ransom to get some of these, you estimate, what, over 1,200 American prisoners?
Yeah, well, the real reason why we know about that meeting is that a Secret Service officer who was doing some wiring for some sensory equipment that he was setting up in the White House overheard the conversation and was horrified by it because they were obviously not going to do anything about this, and nobody knew at that time that there were, most of America thought everybody had come home. And in fact, the thing that I should probably have mentioned first is that there was this story that the whole thing was a myth, a hoax, a right-wing hoax. And liberals chose to believe that. Or they were, you can say they were misled and accepted it. We live in an area of mythology. We've been lied to regularly. We now see that we were lied to even to a greater degree about the Iraq War than anybody ever imagined or ever thought that it was capable of the White House. And most people who respond, for example, to my story, I mean, a lot of people, this can't be. This just can't be. We would know about it by now, or we would. You know, the truth is that there is, I can't write this because I can't prove it, but there are reports which have a strong level of belief from Laotians that they have talked to right now men who are still there alive 35 years later.
But now, what about, because obviously after Nixon and Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter came in, what have the Democrats done on this issue at all, or did they ignore it as well?
The Democrats ignored it. It was not, first of all, high on their priorities. And secondly, to dig into this, Juan, they would have to disrupt the entire government establishment before and after whatever presidency it was. In other words, every national security advisor from Nixon on, this has gone across 7 presidencies. Every president, every national security advisor, every secretary of state probably knows about this.